The first extract that I'll be reading is from this story called The Routine. It's about an engineer, a 20-something engineer who lives in Chicago, and she is going through this major existential dilemma. So let me just start. The routine. You sit on the pot smoking a cigarette. Take a sip of hot coffee. Your head is numb. You are not yet awake, and your eyelids are half open, dangling between day and dream. Today is the deadline. You are to submit your project model. You've spent endless days on it, fixing errors, shooting down viruses, and your boss is the sort of prick who'd make you spend another month on the same project even if you get one parameter wrong. Can't blame her. Your company's chips are used in automated machines, assembly lines, and drones. Discrepancies are not acceptable. There is a lot of money involved, and you get paid quite well too. This is not the right time to think about what's the idea of reality and what's really real. You shouldn't have muddled your head up with all those Zizek interviews, Murakami books, concepts of Maya, and alternate reality theories. You always do this when something serious goes on in real life. You escape to this other reality and obsess about absolutely unnecessary phenomena. What was with that ancient alien series you dwelled on at university? Such crap. You couldn't resist. Gods and aliens, weed and cocaine, a mind-blowing combination. Been a while since. Fuck, your head's throbbing. That bottle of Glenfiddich last night was not a good idea. You should be in bed now, tucked between pillows, unspooling thoughts inspired by alcohol, wading through the matrix. You take a deep drag of your cigarette, rolling the smoke in your mouth, exhaling it through your nostrils, all in quick succession. You never thought that all those years of breathing exercises at yoga class would help you in this manner. You let your eyes shut for a second or two. You sit up with a jolt. The cigarette is about to burn out and burn your fingers. Shit, it's 7:30. You need to hurry. You ash the smoke, leave the pot constipated, step into the hot shower, stand unmoving, let the heat thaw your frozen nervous system, bend your head backwards, run your fingers through your long black hair. There can't be anything wrong with the model. You've tried every possible input that could confuse the program, but it has proven impeccable. The simulations stand as proof. You've done your part, but they never tell you where your programs are used. You're at the bottom of the process chain. A modern-day laborer writes programs that are integrated into the larger system for bigger things that you aren't important enough to know. Not that they treat you bad. You have your own corner, desk, chairs, drawers, ID card, and pin. You could have done without having to share the corner with Thomas, but that's the sort of stuff you associate with fate. Nobody conspired to assign Thomas a place next to you. Computers randomly assign workplaces. The company is very fair that way. Fair, a concept Thomas would have a million things to say about. He is one of those people who can have whole arguments on their own, speaking for both sides. You wouldn't necessarily call him counterintuitive, as all his observations only serve to prove his preconceived, biased ideas. Thinking about Thomas while applying liquid soap to your breast could be considered sexual, but come on, he's insufferable. Although sometimes you do think his droopy eyes, dirty stubble, and lanky frame is attractive. How long have you been in the shower? The last thing you remember was trying to shit. Time is a relative thing, isn't it? You step out of the shower cubicle and roll a towel around your body. They say you can bend space and time, travel to the past or the future. Travel to your past? What a terrifying thought. You get dressed in a pair of jeans and a full-sleeve navy blue shirt. You haven't waxed in weeks, and your hair is a mess. You are presenting your work, not yourself. Put on some makeup at least. Wear your hair in a Buddha bun. Whatever it is, you can't dress in dapper suits like your mindless colleagues. They've all been consumed. But you work for your personal satisfaction, not to climb corporate ladders, and clothes are a personal matter. It's cold today, more so than yesterday, and windy. You wrap your brown woolen scarf around your neck as you leave your gray building. Tuck your fingers in your coat's pockets. The morning air is crisp, it's weightless, empty, devoid of remorse. That's why you like to breathe American air, however cold. Indian air is thick with the patina of history, so heavy it suffocates you. Glad you left that sacred place behind. Dirty clustered alleys and dust thick with loyalties. That's a loop you'd rather stay away from. A loop of allegiance that runs over and over. No logic gates, no effectual algorithms, no end, crashes the software. That's not to say Chicago does not have shapeless garbage dumps and clusters of arrogance. It does. Maybe you should move to Switzerland. You look at the treetops as you walk. Shriveled branches, snow-laden, white all around, glazed roads, frosted glass. Winter sanitizes people's minds, decolorizes the world, freezes it for a moment. There's space to think in this gloomy, melancholic landscape. Ask yourself the larger questions. Entertain strange thoughts. What if you were a mere simulation, a virtual recreation of humanity's past or future, and everything you see is a program someone wrote? Even the codes you write are probably part of a larger code already existent. Or you're an animal kept in a zoo called Earth by aliens, watched, manipulated. Maybe this reality is a dream, Vishnu's dream, while he sleeps on his serpent of time in the cosmic ocean. If allegories unfold and any one of the above is true, you're a speck in the larger order of things, useless, leading a pointless life. But even if you see the truth, what can you do about it? Just follow your dharma and simply do your duty, lead a content life. Except, watch where you're going, an old woman dressed like Queen Elizabeth herself tells you as she smooths her outfit. Sorry, you mumble, as you realize you've bumped into her. Forgot your glasses? She asks, irked. Great. What an annoying way to start the day. Listen to old lady allegories. You need another dose of caffeine, cinnamon flavored. You check your watch, it's 8:15. You have 20 minutes before the next Purple Line train arrives. You get off the pavement across the road, careful not to skid in a mush of muddy snow. You look for the green Starbucks sign, the familiar face of a woman in white. The girl at the counter writes your name in capital letters on the cup. Kaliki. Kaliki. How embarrassing to walk around flaunting your name to the world. But you do, like John, George, and Marcy. Occasionally sip the searing hot cappuccino, wade through obese people, patriots, expats, bankers, white, black, brown, and yellow. At the subway station, you find an empty seat on the platform and read emails from your parents back in India. The usual, the importance of being married. At least this mail does not contain photos of potential Telugu bridegrooms who live in the US. Must be quite a chore to find men for your daughter that are between the ages of 28 and 34 and of the same religion, caste, and subcaste, dietary habits, and profession. Why do your parents assume you'd only marry an engineer from New York, Chicago, or Seattle? Why not South Dakota or Alabama? Not that you'd ever let them arrange your marriage. A train passes by, blowing an expanse of stale air that smells like ammonia. You feel the makeup on your face melt. A memory of Malati auntie who said to you, dark girls like you must wear makeup to cover up ugly pimples and zits. Ah, memories. Just the thought of India makes you angry. All those dimensions, riled up religion, conservative society, neo-modern family, compulsory patriotism, paradoxical traditions, values, each with a million subdivisions. No wonder reality back then had been hell for you. Now you're practically a hermit, living in Chicago, Evanston actually, on your own, sexually and ethically independent. You choose free will. That makes you think of Zizek again. Your life is a classic example of supreme subversion. Your neo-modern, middle-class parents chose this life for you. Free will has taken a beating. Your parents wanted you to become an engineer. They made you leave India and live the middle-class dream in the States. Their dream. Conspiracy. Thank you.
Okay. We'll have a conversation and we'll open it up for Q&As at the end after all three readings. So one of the first things when I read it specifically that did stand out to me was the existentialism, right? And I think that's also the first concept you encounter other than the constipation. The first concept that you encounter is the existential crisis that this girl is going through. And for a while, you don't even realize it's a woman. that comes in much later after, when she's having a shower and you encounter her physical body. Till then, it's just someone having an existential crisis, which is also quite nice. But the existential crisis itself starts drawing parallels very often from both pop culture, and by pop culture I mean American pop culture, Hollywood's version of pop culture, and also mythology, which is Indian. And she's kind of mulling over both in her head at the same time, right? So that kind of dynamic, could you kind of elaborate that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, or a point actually to talk about, because I think, it's not just particularly her. I think most millennials, I would say, around the world, we all have this sort of very mixed way of thinking. It's not like we think in any one culturally, we don't think in any one monoculture. We're all sort of connected in all these different ways. And I think the amount of content that we all watch or read, or the sort of theories and ideas that we sort of, like even now, Game of Thrones, like everybody is just looking forward to like watching Game of Thrones every Monday. It's like we do everything like working up to that, So it's like, for us, the reality is different, right? So it's not like reality is reality. So we have another reality. This is sort of just like the routine that we're doing. So this entire story came up in that way, So this girl's living this life in Chicago. She feels like she's, so independent, and she's making her own money. She's living away from her parents, and she's like not getting married, even though her parents want her to. But she realizes, by the end of it, that end of the story, that she's really a sort of slave to this larger thing. Although she thinks so much, and when she decides that she's, the story goes on that she decides that she's going to just quit her job, go back to Hyderabad and start her own like startup, because that's what she feels is her calling. But then it turns out that her program was great, and her boss gives her a, raise, and she, says, I'll let you, get a green card for you. So then she's like, okay, fine. I'm just going to give up all these ideas and just go back to the routine, So I think, what I try to do in this book is, like Virginia Woolf said, think of things in themselves. So I tried not to judge any of my characters. So I put them in these situations and I make them do these things. I don't even think I make them do it. I come up with a situation and it's like a character choice that the character sort of, does and takes on. So I think a lot of things Kalki in this story does, I feel you might not even agree with, you might judge her, But I try to at least write the story without judging her.
Okay, one of the other things, especially because you said like, don't judge her, right, is the crudeness of her internal monologue. Yeah. Let's all be honest, like no one's thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not being able to do that. In the, you're saying...
None of us think in Victorian English.
No one
like,
thinks in ye old English and, oh, the warm water in my hair. And that's not what's happening, right? Your internal monologue is very crude and in many ways very kind of direct, because the only person who's encountering it is you. So that's, I think when you start reading, it's always kind of like, oh. But then when you, like you mentioned, as you go forward in the story and when she starts encountering people, it's fascinating to see how her internal dialogue becomes her voice, and that transition is also something I think that was very interesting.
Yeah, it's now that I have a daughter, it's even like more, I constantly think about not using bad language in front of her, but obviously inside your head you're thinking in that language. So with Kalki, you're right. So she's thinking like this, and then when she suddenly encounters a person, she's talking, so nicely to them. So that's something that I thought that was true to her. That's how she thinks, and she thinks a lot about in the story she also has a point where, like you said, she doesn't really think about the fact that she's a woman all the time. It's not like she's walking around thinking, I'm a woman, so she suddenly gets her period, and then she's like, shit, I forgot about this, just 2 days early. So it's like these things about being a woman for her in Kalki's experience of, her sexuality, her experiencing her gender. It's not something that she's constantly thinking about, because she thinks of herself as a, person living a sort of emancipated life. She's not living like, in all those sort of, that's why she left India, because she thought that was, keeping her down sexually, like through her sexuality. But what she realizes is that even though she's in the States, she's not really left anything, because she's still sort of in all these systems and these sort of larger order of things. Yeah, so I think, that's pretty much.
No, picking up from that, especially in the extract bit that you just read, it's like she made the decision, but also she didn't, right? Her parents put the dream in her, kind of like incepted. Again, another pop culture reference about the inception of an idea at a younger age. And then she deals with the same idea as both being proof of her free will, but also the complete lack of there being free will in the fact that now it's her routine. And that now that she is part of the system, she's like, but it was almost predestined to be here.
That is the sort of thing that interests me a lot about the idea of free will, which I explore in a lot of other stories as well, where even when a character thinks, or a person thinks that, what they are doing is because of their free will, right? Even, I'm just going to put this away because it's, so even though people think that they are, it's okay now? Even though people think that they are, making a choice based on their free will, they're still stuck within so many, sort of larger order of things that they can't really break out of it. Like the only way you can is, like the Buddha says, she refers a lot to the Buddha also in the story, where, you think of the anatta.
That's again a very millennial thing, right? Like this Buddha, new wave religion, kind of,
And you sort of dissociate yourself from the reality to sort of, So yes, that's...
And there's another reality which is beautiful, and you just have to suffer through this.
Suffer through this reality to just live in that reality. Watch the Game of Thrones on Monday. Like, that's sort of what she goes through, Right. And I think that I found it really fascinating with her as I wrote her story, as it went on and on, because she was making these choices, like, where, I don't feel like my characters make these choices, so it felt right for her to do that at that particular point. And then you realize that, as it goes on, that none of those choices that she's really made are her own choices, in her own reality. It's not like it's me doing it. So that's why she looks at all these, at a point she says that, have you watched the movie Being John Malkovich? So it's like Being John Malkovich and Being John Malkovich, which is a movie about, people can get into your head and like make you do things and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very, this story I think is among the more sort of thinky stories. So, but I thought it's a good story to start with.
Yeah, no, and I think when you all do read it, which I strongly encourage, there's a pacing in the structure as well. I know I'm getting a little off the storytelling bit, but just the way the language is structured. You can it goes from this lethargy of the morning routine to this waiting for the public transport to this very rushed sentence structure and way of writing towards the end when she's going to meet her boss. Because that time, I mean, how do you account for working hours? But you can account for waiting for a train and all of that. So it's very nicely fits into even the language of the story, where you can feel the pacing of the story. Like I read the last bit of when she goes to meet her doctor, like I read it in a rushed voice. Because it's not the doctor, I'm sorry, her boss. She reads it I read it in a rushed voice because it felt like it just kind of happened.
Which is why I think I wrote this story as you, in that person, because I felt that was the perfect way to write that story, because I felt like a lot of people could read into her mind, like, make her do these things or like
which
imagine
is why
it.
Then Being John Malkovich even kind of
exactly.
adds to. So.
So I think among other things in that story is also one of the things I looked at is that she's come out of this relationship with somebody and she doesn't want to be in a relationship with anyone, and she's attracted to Thomas, who she talks about in the story. So Thomas is also in his own head, and so they like talk, suddenly they talk, suddenly they don't talk, and in the end the story ends with how they're just both sort of staring into their computer screens. They just talk and then they're like, I go back to my screen and you go back to your screen. That's the end of that story.
Yeah, and it's also and it's interesting that you chose a programmer, because they run routines even in programming. Like that's one of the terminologies of. I'm not very familiar with it, but I do know that you run routines to check things as well. So it's quite...
You have like this thing where you can just sort of run it again and again to check, if it's working.
To check it again and again. So
this is sort of like what I feel, I mean, because I am an engineer, I sometimes engineers dream about like very weird stuff like Java and Oracle, and you think of like zeros and ones. It's not even like, it's true. It's like, it's so bizarre, and then you watch The Matrix and you're like, this is the shit, like, you feel it. Because, you really feel the world is that. And so she obsesses about with all these things, and she's the person who does her weed, her cocaine. She's tried all the alcohol that she possibly can. And, you know, so she's like, she can't even trust herself because she's probably, you know, just imagining things for God knows what. But there are all these theories that we muddle our heads with as well. So anyway, so that's about Kalki.
Yeah.